In the middle of the night, I saw a WeChat message on my boyfriend's phone. "If you didn't have a girlfriend, would you like me?" He replied with just one word. "Yes." I handed him the phone, showing him the chat. He stayed silent for a long while, then pressed out his cigarette and said, "I told you she's just a colleague, and I promised nothing will ever happen between us. Isn't that enough?" His face was expressionless when he said that, but the disappointment and blame in his voice were painfully clear. At that moment, I realized I didn't really know this person anymore. Chapter 1. Half asleep, half awake. I heard the sound of the door opening and someone walking slowly toward the bed. That familiar sense surrounded me. I sat up and wrapped my arms around Adrian's neck. Just as my lips were about to touch his, he suddenly turned his head away, dodging my kiss. That instinctive movement stunned both of us and drove away the last trace of sleepiness in me. Maybe to avoid the awkwardness, Adrian tugged at his tie and walked straight into the bathroom. Soon after, the sound of running water echoed softly through the door. Adrian had been working overtime a lot lately, often coming home very late, thinking he might not have even had time to eat. Half of my irritation faded instantly. I reached for my phone to order him some food, but then remembered it was still charging in the living room. Turning my head, I noticed Adrian's phone lying carelessly by his pillow. Without giving it much thought, I picked it up, opened the delivery app, and ordered a bowl of pork bone noodle soup from his favorite restaurant. Just as I was about to lock the screen, a new notification popped up from Meituan. "Your runner order has been delivered." The items listed were a pack of brown sugar and a box of menstrual pain relief capsules. Then, almost immediately, a new WeChat message appeared. "The painkillers really helped. Thanks," smiley face. I froze, my finger hovering above the screen for a long time before finally tapping into the chat. The most recent messages were from half an hour ago. "Adrian, you didn't look well when you left just now." The other person sent a pitiful emoji. "Adrian, I've finished the project." The other person, "Nice, that means I can sleep in tomorrow and come to the office later." Adrian, mm. A few minutes later, he texted again. "Feeling any better?" No reply. 5 minutes passed before he sent another message. "I bought you a few things. Keep warm these days." He hadn't saved her under any special nickname, but from the profile picture and the tone of their conversation, it was clear she was Virginia. Chapter 2. The first time I heard the name Virginia was a month ago. That day, Adrian and I went to the movies. Halfway through, I noticed he seemed distracted. When I turned to look at him again, he was staring down at his phone, the corners of his lips slightly curved, his whole expression soft and relaxed. I watched him for a while before hesitantly asking, "What are you looking at?" Still looking at his screen, Adrian replied with a faint smile in his voice, "Virginia." The air froze for a brief second. That was the first time I ever heard the name Virginia spoken from Adrian's lips. His tone was slow and gentle, wrapping her name around his tongue as if savoring it. It sounded beautiful. Then, as if realizing something, he suddenly looked up at me. After meeting my gaze for 2 seconds, he handed me his phone and explained earnestly, "Virginia is a new colleague at the company. She's very diligent. I just see her as a junior I can guide." I stared straight at the screen. The girl in the video seemed to be celebrating her birthday. Someone had smeared cake on her face, and she didn't care at all, just grinned brightly in return. You could tell right away she was a cheerful, good-natured girl. The video was sent in the work group. Adrian added quickly. I just clicked on it for a second. He took my hand and held it tightly. His palm was warm, and his voice was as gentle as ever. "Jane, trust me." I looked at him for a long time. His expression was calm and sincere. He didn't look like he was lying. But somehow, I couldn't get his earlier smile out of my head. Until the end of the movie, neither of us said another word. I hadn't realized then everything had already started showing signs. Chapter 3. 10 minutes later, the bathroom door opened. Adrian came out wearing pajamas, his damp hair still dripping water. When our eyes met, he froze for a moment. "You went through my phone?" I opened my mouth to speak, but a tickle rose in my throat and I had to cover my lips to cough softly. Adrian stared at me for a few seconds before hesitantly asking, "You caught a cold?" I nodded lightly. It was already autumn. I'd always had a weak immune system if I wasn't careful. a mild chill could turn into a serious fever. In the 5 years I'd been with Adrian, every time the seasons changed, he'd act like it was some kind of emergency. He'd check the weather forecast every day, remind me to take an umbrella, or drag me to the gym, always preparing for the worst. When I teased him for being too anxious, he'd wrap his arms around my waist from behind, bury his face in my shoulder, and mumble, "I don't want you getting sick, not even a little cold." But these past few days, Adrian and I had fallen into a strange, silent Cold War, and it seemed he hadn't noticed at all. Chapter 4. Work has just been too busy lately. I didn't notice. Adrian's voice pulled me back from my thoughts. I hadn't realized when he'd sat down beside the bed. He tugged the blanket over me, a faint guilt flickering in his eyes. "It won't happen again." I was still holding his phone. "Is it really just because of work?" I asked quietly. "There's really nothing going on between me and Virginia." He took a cigarette from the drawer, lit it, and exhaled slowly, sounding completely exhausted. I didn't respond. I just handed him the chat I'd found moments ago. It was from 3 days earlier. Virginia had apparently been drinking and sent him a message in the middle of the night. "If you didn't have a girlfriend, would you like me?" Adrian had replied with only one word, "Yes." He froze as he read it. After a few seconds of silence, he put out the cigarette and looked up at me. "I told you she's just a colleague, and I promised nothing will ever happen between us. Isn't that enough?" His face showed no expression, but his voice carried clear disappointment and blame. In that instant, I realized I didn't recognize this person anymore. Chapter 5. Right in the middle of our argument, Adrian's phone buzzed again at the worst possible time. A new message popped up. It was from Virginia, asking if he'd eaten. Then another came through. "I bet you haven't. I ordered you a bowl of pork bone noodle soup from that place I took you to last time." I stared blankly at the screen, my heart tightening as if a giant hand had gripped and twisted it. It hurt so much I could barely breathe. Adrian never used to like noodles. When he was a kid, his family had very little. His father passed away early, and his mother worked far away, often leaving him home alone, barely able to eat. He was quiet and withdrawn back then, the kind of boy no one wanted to play with, except me. I'd often go find him just so he wouldn't be alone. Once, I stopped by to bring him something. As soon as I stepped into the small house, I saw him sitting on a wooden stool, eating noodles from a plain bowl, clear broth, no vegetables, not even a hint of flavor. When he noticed me watching, he froze for a moment, awkward and unsure. Then he quickly composed himself, pretending nothing had happened, and kept eating. I remember staring at his thin, fragile face and feeling a deep sadness. Maybe a kind of shared loneliness too. My mother had always wanted a son, but after giving birth to me, she suffered complications that made it impossible to have another child. She resented me for it. Those hopeless, desolate days were something Adrian and I endured together, comforting each other little by little, until he graduated from middle school. His mother's business took off. She even made it onto the finance news, and she took him away. For a long time, I didn't see him again, not until we met by chance in college. After we started dating, I realized Adrian never ate noodles. I had a feeling why. He didn't want to be reminded of those days of poverty and loneliness. But lately, I'd seen him bringing home noodle soup from that corner shop quite often. At first, I'd even teased him about it, asking why he suddenly liked noodles so much. He'd replied casually, "No reason, I just felt like it." I remember feeling relieved then, thinking maybe he'd finally moved on from the past. But now I knew the truth. It wasn't that he'd let go of the past. It was because of her. Chapter 6. I told Adrian I wanted to break up. As I zipped up my suitcase, Adrian suddenly grabbed my wrist. "Jane, are you really leaving?" I was forced to look up at him. I used to love the way Adrian looked at me, gentle, careful, as if I were the only thing in his world. In our sophomore year of college, my roommate and I had planned a trip to Tibet, but she canceled at the last minute. Since the flight and travel plans were already set, I decided to go alone. On my second day there, I went hiking. When the hazy light of dawn spilled through the misty mountains, I saw a familiar face. It was Adrian. "I thought you were still in Beijing for the competition?" I asked, surprised and delighted. He rubbed his hands together, took off the scarf around his neck, and carefully wrapped it around me. His face and ears were red from the cold, his voice trembling slightly. I saw your post on WeChat saying you came to Tibet alone to watch the sunrise. I couldn't stop worrying, so I came early. I wanted to see it with you. Adrian's eyes never left mine. The soft golden sunlight reflected in them, and its warmth spread quietly into my heart. After that trip, things between us changed, subtly at first. But soon, we were together. But now, everything seemed different. I hadn't changed. My heart and eyes were still full of him. Yet when he looked at me now, there was only irritation and impatience. Maybe he didn't even realize it himself. Finish packing. I'll move out in the morning. Pulling myself from those thoughts, I avoided his gaze and drew my hand back. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. It was past midnight by the time I finished packing. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the bed. When I unlocked my phone, I saw a new friend request. I'm Virginia. After I accepted, she didn't send a message. On impulse, I opened her Moments feed. The newest post was from just minutes ago. There were 2 photos. The first was a selfie, her face bright and smiling, with a steaming bowl of pork bone noodle soup on the table behind her. The second photo showed another bowl of the same noodles, but the background was achingly familiar. The checkered dining table, and the vase of blooming roses sitting atop it. That vase was the one Adrian and I had bought together during a supermarket trip. The caption read, "Ha ha ha, sharing a bowl of noodles online with someone special. Visible to one person only." And below it, Adrian had given it a like. Chapter 7. I didn't sleep well that night. In my dreams, I was a child again, holding a cotton swab soaked in antiseptic, carefully dabbing at the bruise on the corner of Adrian's lips. He didn't react much, but I started crying before he even said a word. Then the dream shifted to that morning on the mountain when we watched the sunrise together. The wind was strong, and his cool hands wrapped around mine, tucking both into his pocket. But in the end, the scene changed. Adrian was holding Virginia, the 2 of them walking past me indifferently, without even sparing me a glance. The dream felt too real, so real that when I woke up and went downstairs the next morning, seeing Virginia there left me completely stunned. I had only seen her before in the video on Adrian's phone. Thinking about it now, this was actually the first time we'd met in person. To be fair, Virginia was beautiful, fair skin, a long slender neck, elegant and effortless. She was sitting on the sofa, her head slightly tilted up. There was a small cut on her forehead, still bleeding faintly. Adrian was tending to her wound, head lowered, one hand gently holding her chin in place, the other carefully pressing a cotton pad to her injury. His movements were cautious, almost tender. Virginia winced and let out a small ah. Adrian's hands instantly slowed down. Sunlight streamed in through the blinds, falling across his face, illuminating the tension and worry in his eyes. From where I stood on the stairs, I saw everything, crystal clear. The hand gripping my suitcase slackened unconsciously, the sound breaking the stillness. Adrian turned, frowned at me, but didn't say a word. It was Virginia who spoke first, composed, polite. Introducing herself, she explained that Adrian had a client meeting later and that she'd just come to drop off some documents. The elevator in your building is broken, she added. I tripped on the stairs just now. I'm really sorry for the trouble. I said nothing, just pulled my suitcase toward the door. But as I opened it, Adrian grabbed my hand. He looked down at me, his tone sharp and impatient. Haven't you made enough of a scene? His grip was tight, painfully tight. I struggled to pull free, but he only held on harder. In the tugging, the cuff of his sleeve shifted, revealing a gray wristwatch. I froze. Last month, on his birthday, I had bought him a silver watch as a gift, only to notice he was already wearing a gray one. No visible brand, but from the design, it was clearly expensive. When I asked about it, Adrian had said simply, "A friend gave it to me." Adrian came from a much wealthier family than mine now, though he'd always been careful not to make me feel small. Still, that was the first time I'd felt truly insecure about the difference between us. I hadn't said anything then, but he'd noticed anyway. He'd sighed softly, hugged me from behind, his warm lips brushing my ear as he murmured, The brand doesn't matter. What matters is that it's from you. After that day, he put the gray watch away and worn mine every day instead. I never imagined that on the very first day after our breakup, he'd be wearing that gray watch again. A bitter laugh escaped me. Move, I said calmly. Adrian seemed to realize something then. He pulled his hand back abruptly, his tone faltering. The client I'm meeting today is really important for the company. Before he could finish, Virginia spoke up, reminding him that it was time to leave for the meeting. I glanced at her, something clicking in my mind. Then I turned to Adrian. The watch, did she give it to you? Adrian was silent. After a long pause, he finally said, Jane, it's just a watch. I didn't want to say another word. I picked up my phone, but before I could dial, Dorian arrived. Dorian is my younger brother, 5 years younger. My mother had never given up on having a son. She'd spent years seeking doctors, trying remedies, wasting money on miracle cures and acupuncture. Finally, when I was 5, she got pregnant again. Since then, all her love had gone to my brother. She remained distant with me, but Dorian and I always got along well. Just one suitcase? Dorian scratched his head, looking uncertain. Yeah, well, he looked more conflicted. I thought girls always have tons of stuff when they move. I didn't think I could handle it alone, so I brought Leo to help. I blinked in surprise. Leonardo? Chapter 8. Yeah, Leo just got back from a business trip in Shanghai, and I dragged him over right away. Dorian was halfway through his sentence when his phone suddenly rang. A low, slightly husky voice came through the receiver. Are you ready? All set. All set. You don't need to come up. We're heading downstairs now. Dorian spoke while picking up my suitcase. Sister, let's go. I didn't hesitate any longer. I grabbed my bag and followed him out the door. Behind me, Adrian seemed to be calling my name, but my steps didn't falter in the slightest, nor did I look back at him. Leonardo's car was parked by the roadside. When we walked over, he was sitting inside, his slender fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel, lost in thought. I looked at the clean, sharp lines of his side profile, dazed for a moment. Leonardo had been my high school classmate, the top student everyone admired, but he had always been cold and distant, while I was shy and introverted. Though we shared the same desk, we barely exchanged a few words throughout the entire year. After graduation, I thought we would never cross paths again, until 2 months ago, when Dorian started his internship at a securities company. I went to visit him once, and that's when I found out Leonardo was his boss. Leo, Dorian called out suddenly. The man in the driver's seat turned his head, and our eyes met for a brief moment. I greeted him politely, thought for a second, then reached for the backseat door. Just as I was about to get in, Leonardo spoke. Sit in the front. It'll help with the motion sickness, he added casually. I froze for a moment but didn't ask how he knew I got carsick. Quietly, I closed the back door and sat in the front passenger seat. No one spoke for the rest of the ride. When we arrived home, it was already 2 in the afternoon. Leonardo dropped us off downstairs and drove straight back to the office without coming up. My mother came out of the kitchen holding 2 dishes, gave me a cold glance, and her face darkened. But when she looked at Dorian, her expression softened. The food's warm. Come eat. That meal was eaten in silence. My mother never liked me, so I hadn't planned to stay long this time, just until I found a place of my own. In the evening, she sat on the sofa knitting. Maybe her eyesight had worsened with age. She didn't even notice when the ball of gray yarn rolled onto the floor. I quietly picked it up and placed it on the coffee table. Just as I was about to return to my room, her voice came from above, tinged with anger. Why did you break up with Adrian? I stopped, saying nothing. Adrian told me everything. It was just a female colleague giving him a watch. Nothing actually happened. What are you making such a fuss about? I stared at her in disbelief, my throat tightening. It had always been like this. When I was little and my classmates tripped me on purpose, I came home crying to tell her. She was feeding my brother at the time. She didn't even flinch, just scolded me. What's the point of telling me? Why do they only pick on you and not anyone else? Maybe you should ask yourself what you did wrong. I never imagined she'd say something so cruel. I stood there frozen. My brother, seeing I wasn't fighting back, tugged at my hair with a mischievous grin. I instinctively pushed him away. Before I could react, a stinging slap landed hard across my face, while she soothed my crying brother. My mother glared at me, her eyes sharp and cold. I ran out of the house with tears streaming down my face, running and running until I couldn't anymore. Finally, I collapsed, burying my face into my knees. It was Adrian who found me in the end. He sat beside me, gently patting my back without a word, as if melting away all the pain in my chest. Back then, I thought my mother might never take my side, but Adrian would. Enough. You need to be more sensible. He's coming to pick you up tomorrow. Just give him an easy way out and let this blow over. Her approach snapped me back to reality. She glanced at me, then lowered her head, continuing to knit. Even if you don't think for yourself, think about your brother. You know who Adrian's mother is. She's got influence, plenty of resources for your brother's future. I didn't know how I got back to my room. The lights were off, everything shrouded in darkness. Outside, the sound of a heated argument broke the silence. I sat motionless on the edge of my bed, staring blankly out the window. I didn't know how much time had passed when the door finally opened. Someone wrapped their arms around me, resting their forehead on my shoulder. His voice trembled, thick with suppressed sobs. "Sister, I'm sorry. I don't know why she's like this. We're both her children." I turned to face him. His face, so much like mine, was streaked with tears, his eyes red. I used to try to hate Dorian, channeling all my resentment toward our mother, my anger, frustration, and all the love I could never get into hatred for him. It made things easier somehow. But once he grew up, he was too kind to me. I couldn't hate him, no matter how hard I tried. I rented an apartment, he said finally. Just signed the contract. I planned to live there myself, but you can move in first. Then, in a steady voice, he said, "Your future belongs to you. Mine belongs to me. You don't need to live for me, or for anyone else. Just do what you truly want. Sister, I'll help you move tomorrow." Chapter 9. Before going to bed, I received a WeChat message from Virginia. If that watch made you misunderstand, I can explain. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, she sent another message. "Last month, my mom brought back 2 watches from abroad. I kept one, the women's style, and since it happened to be Adrian's birthday, I gave him the other one. I didn't think much of it at the time." Then she added another line. Adrian knew about it too. I stared at the screen for a while before typing a reply. "So, you're saying you have the same model of watch, just the women's version?" Virginia didn't reply again. The next morning, after a simple round of packing, I carried my old suitcase and got into the DD ride that Dorian had booked early in advance. Through the rearview mirror, I saw my mother standing in the doorway. She stared blankly at us, her lips moving as if she wanted to say something. But in the end, I couldn't tell whether she did. On the road, Adrian called several times and sent dozens of messages, asking where I was. I only replied with one sentence. "We've already broken up." After a long pause, he finally replied, "Jane." I didn't agree to that. I blocked all his contacts without hesitation. The apartment Dorian rented was a small 2-bedroom place, modern, minimalistic, clean, and close to my office. It took us the whole afternoon to get everything unpacked and organized. Dorian collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. "Sis, you owe me a big dinner tonight," he said lazily. I chuckled. "Deal," while booking a restaurant on my phone. I thought for a moment and asked Dorian to invite Leonardo as well, to thank him for helping me move yesterday. The traffic was bad, so it took us over an hour to get there. Leonardo was already seated when we arrived. He sat with his head slightly lowered, one hand resting on his bent knee, the other gently stirring his coffee. The noise around him seemed to belong to another world entirely. For a brief moment, an image from high school flashed in my mind, a nap I woke from after a nightmare. My breathing uneven, out of the corner of my eye. I had glanced at Leonardo. He was doing exercises, sitting upright, pen in hand, writing formulas on scratch paper. His nails were neatly trimmed. He must have sensed my gaze, because he turned to look at me briefly, then silently handed me a tissue before returning to his work. It took me a while to realize what he'd done. I used the tissue to wipe my forehead, only to find it soaked through with sweat. My thoughts scattered as Dorian muttered beside me, covering his head dramatically. Oh, great. I was already late for work. Now I'm even late for the dinner I'm treating him to. Leo's gonna kill me, old grudge and new. I tugged him along and said sincerely, sorry we're late. Order whatever you want, don't hold back for my sake. Leonardo looked at me for a moment, then smiled slightly. It's fine, I just got here too. He waved for the waiter and naturally handed me the menu. Why don't you choose? Halfway through the meal, soft piano music began playing. That's when I noticed a large stage in the center of the restaurant, with a white piano placed on it. A young woman sat there, her back to the crowd, playing gracefully. Behind her hung a wall full of heart-shaped charms, love tokens. Dorian coughed lightly and leaned over to whisper. This is their marketing gimmick. Couples who dine here can go up and play a piece together. Then they get one of those heart charms with their names written on it. Makes the place popular with dating couples. I was chewing when I absent-mindedly replied, oh, and ended up choking. As I lowered my head, coughing softly, someone gently patted my back. When I finally caught my breath, a bowl of soup was pushed in front of me. Following the movement of that slender hand upward, I met Leonardo's dark eyes. I froze. Leonardo did too, then quickly reached over to Dorian and filled his bowl as well. Dorian blinked, confused, but I didn't choke. Leonardo said nothing, his silence more eloquent than any words. The air turned a little awkward. Dorian glanced between us, then quietly excused himself to the restroom. The piano music ended, almost unconsciously. I turned to look at the stage. The woman stood up and turned around. It was Virginia. She smiled as she accepted the heart charm from the staff, lowered her head to write something on it, and then walked back to her table. Of course, sitting across from her was Adrian. He was holding the charm in his hand. From where I sat, I couldn't see his expression clearly. Virginia leaned closer and said something to him. Then, he laughed, as if sensing someone's gaze. Adrian looked up and met my eyes. Chapter 10. In that instant, his eyes widened in shock, and his expression darkened. The next second, he was already striding toward me. His gaze paused briefly on Leonardo's face before turning to me. What's your relationship with him? The accusing tone in his voice instantly ignited anger inside me. My eyes dropped to the thing he was gripping tightly in his hand, and I asked flatly, does the heart charm look nice? Adrian's expression shifted. It took him a while before he said, it's not what you think. I stared at him, unable to understand why he still looked so self-righteous. The boy I remembered, gentle, earnest, always looking at me with warmth, was fading further and further away. That's right. Virginia had walked over too, her face calm and confident. Adrian and I made a bet. If I could win one of those heart charms, he'd treat me to dinner. He didn't expect I could play the piano. I looked at her expressionlessly. So, you mean this is just another misunderstanding? She smiled faintly. Of course. Adrian seemed relieved. The unease in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by that all-too-familiar silent reproach. It was as if he were saying, Jane, see? You're just overreacting again. The irony made me feel strangely tired. After a long silence, I asked softly, do you still love me? Adrian froze and instinctively glanced at Virginia. Then he quickly looked back at me, his voice firm and deliberate. Jane, I love you. My heart clenched tightly for a moment. I knew Adrian probably didn't have deep feelings for Virginia, and I believed he did love me, at least once. But when someone loves you too intensely, you can also feel it clearly when that love starts to fade. Even someone as oblivious as me could see it. I once heard someone say that destruction is always the easiest thing. And in that moment, when he looked at Virginia, when he hesitated, my love for him quietly crumbled to dust. Adrian seemed to realize something. He reached out, trying to touch my cheek, but I moved away without a word. His hand froze midair, and panic flickered across his face. Jane, I know I've made mistakes before, and I'm sorry, but this thing with the heart charm, it's really a misunderstanding. I never wanted to be with her. Please, forgive me, okay? I looked at him calmly, noticing from the corner of my eye that Virginia's face had gone pale. A quiet, derisive laugh broke the tension, a sound filled with sarcasm. Excuse me, A deep voice said, I have a question for the two of you. Leonardo stood up slowly, his gaze moving between Adrian and Virginia, as if he were an observer watching a play unfold. Do you two know what that heart charm symbolizes? Adrian glared at him coldly without answering. So you do know. Leonardo smiled faintly, his tone carrying a hint of disdain. Hiding behind the word friends while doing things meant for lovers, you two seem to understand each other quite well. Adrian's face turned pale. We went home in Leonardo's car. It was late at night, and the highway was nearly empty. Leonardo drove steadily, unhurriedly. Dorian was curled up in the back seat under a blanket, already fast asleep. Soft, soothing music played in the car. I had just stifled a yawn when Leonardo's deep voice broke the silence. It'll be about half an hour more. Do you want to rest a bit? I shook my head. No. The car fell quiet again, lost in thought. My gaze drifted toward Leonardo. He focused on the road, his side profile cool and defined in the dim light. I suddenly remembered what he had said to Adrian earlier. I want to ask you something. Leonardo responded with a quiet If you already had a girlfriend, but then you developed feelings for another girl, what would you do? Leonardo turned slightly to glance at me, his voice calm and unhurried. I've been loyal my whole life. That kind of what if doesn't really happen to me. I was momentarily speechless and looked away. But if it did? He was silent for a moment before saying, a fleeting attraction might be normal, but people should have boundaries. If you cross the line and can't control yourself, yet don't have the decency to break up with the person you're with, man or woman, that's just pure trash. I listened quietly. Then, after a pause, couldn't help but tease. So you do curse sometimes? Leonardo replied calmly. Only at trash. I was speechless. Even after getting out of the car, I was still a little dazed. I realized that Leonardo wasn't quite like how I remembered him. He felt real, not exactly warm, but not as distant or hard to approach as I had thought. For the next month, I threw myself completely into work. Adrian came to see me many times, always waiting outside my company's entrance. His tone was soft, his attitude sincere, even though I ignored him every single time. He never gave up, rain or shine. He was there every day. That evening, I worked overtime. A colleague who went out to buy bread brought me some and hesitated before saying, it's raining heavily outside. Your ex-boyfriend is still standing out there. We tried to let him in, but he refused. My heart skipped a beat. I grabbed an umbrella from my drawer and rushed downstairs. The moment I swiped my card and stepped out of the building, I realized how hard it was raining. Adrian stood in the downpour, raindrops sliding down from his short hair along his jawline. He was soaked from head to toe. Silently, I walked over and held the umbrella above him. Come with me. Under the curious gazes of a few passers-by, I led Adrian back into the building and handed him a pack of tissues. He sat down slowly, his voice carrying a faint smile. Jane, you still care about me. Seeing that hint of self-satisfaction flicker across his eyes, irritation rose in my chest. Wait until the rain lightens, then leave, I said flatly. Adrian froze, his tone instantly softening. I know I didn't handle the whole thing with Virginia well, but she and I. The sound of that name made something in me twist with disgust. I cut him off coldly. I don't want to hear any more explanations. It's over. Maybe my voice was too calm, too detached. Because his face darkened immediately. What do you want from me? You really want to break up over something this trivial? I looked up at him in shock, my whole body turning cold, realizing what he just said. Adrian quickly apologized. I'm sorry, I just don't get it. Nothing happened between me and her. So how did things end up like this? His brows furrowed, his expression genuinely confused. What else do you want me to do, Jane? I didn't do anything with her, just because of a meaningless message. You're ending us? When he finished, a trace of impatience crossed his face. Maybe he truly didn't understand why I wouldn't forgive him, even after he'd lowered his pride to coax me. But was he really that clueless? Did he not realize that every time he indulged Virginia's closeness, every time he didn't push her away, he was gambling with my trust? Did he not understand that he had already crossed my line and was simply betting on whether I'd forgive him again? I touched my face absent-mindedly. It was cold and wet. Adrian panicked, trying to hand me a tissue to wipe my tears. Adrian, I said quietly, you just said nothing happened between you two, right? He hesitated for a few seconds, then nodded. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots, Virginia's private WeChat post visible only to him, and the watch explanation message she had sent me before. How about now? You say nothing happened, but why is it that everything you do looks exactly like what couples do? Adrian's face turned paler and paler. Finally, I heard my own voice, so small, so fragile, as I asked. Adrian, you used to hate noodles. Why have you suddenly fallen in love with pork bone noodle soup lately? That night, the rain poured harder than ever, the sound of it drowning everything around us. Adrian said nothing for a long time. Then, quietly, he turned and disappeared into the curtain of rain. A month passed. Adrian never came to see me again, to help me relax. Dorian took me hiking several times, and somehow, Leonardo always came along too. So lately, I'd grown closer to Leonardo. We weren't exactly close, but at least we could be considered friends. The Mid-Autumn Festival was coming soon, and work got even busier. I was staying at the office until 9 or 10 every night. My dad usually didn't message me unless it was something important, but today he sent me a WeChat. Jane, are you coming home for the festival? Your mom bought a lot of hairy crabs. I thought for a moment before typing back. Work's been busy lately. I might have to work overtime. It took him a long time to reply. Take care of yourself. The day before the holiday, a call came from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, I realized it was Virginia. She asked if I had time to meet for coffee. After thinking for a while, I replied, okay. Chapter 11. The cafe Virginia chose wasn't far from my office, so I went straight there after work. As soon as I sat down, the first thing she said was, I don't want Adrian anymore. I stared at her, utterly confused. For a second, I wondered if she had lost her mind. After that night at the restaurant, I confessed to Adrian. She said. She paused for a moment. Her tone sounded indifferent, but there was a faint bitterness underneath that couldn't be hidden. This time, he rejected me, clearly. This time? I couldn't help curling my lips into a small, ironic smile. I lifted my cup and took a sip of coffee. I didn't give up. She continued. I've been staying by his side these days, but he's grown colder and colder toward me. His rejections get sharper each time. There was a company dinner once. Some colleagues started teasing us, saying we looked good together. His face instantly darkened. He warned them to stop joking around because he already had a girlfriend. Virginia let out a quiet, sarcastic laugh. But everyone there knew he had already broken up with you. My hand froze slightly around the cup. I didn't understand what Adrian was trying to prove by doing that. The thing that finally made me give up. Virginia suddenly looked up, her eyes glistening slightly red. Was that night after the dinner? He drank too much and called a driver to take him home. I was worried, so I followed the car. Then I saw him stop in front of your apartment building. She paused for a long time before continuing. I saw you going upstairs with another man. I blinked, taken aback. A flood of memories rushed back all at once. The day she mentioned must have been last weekend when I went hiking with Dorian and Leonardo. On the way down the mountain, Leonardo and I had been chatting about the funny nicknames our classmates used to have in high school. Then Dorian suddenly chimed in. I saw Leo video calling his mom at work last time. She called him Lele and told him to hurry up and find a girlfriend. I looked at Leonardo in surprise. Lele? A faint blush crept up his ears, though he pretended to stay calm. He gave a quiet then said seriously, don't call me that again. I tried to hold back my laughter, but failed completely. He stayed silent the rest of the way, and I couldn't stop laughing. Unfortunately, I ended up spraining my ankle on the way down. After they dropped me off at home, I realized I was out of iodine and cotton swabs, so I asked Dorian, who knew the area well, to go to the pharmacy. Leonardo helped me upstairs. Apparently, that was the moment Adrian had seen. A misunderstanding, but not one worth explaining anymore. I'd never seen Adrian like that. Virginia whispered, her voice trembling slightly as if she was trying to suppress something. For someone who's always so clean and put together, he was sitting on the ground, hunched over, shaking uncontrollably. I could hear him crying. Virginia gave a faint, self-mocking smile. In that moment, I finally understood he really did regret it. She wiped the corner of her eye, then looked straight at me as if nothing had happened. It's a pity, isn't it? You won't forgive him anymore, will you? I met her gaze. The tension and uncertainty in her eyes were impossible to miss. And in that instant, I finally understood why she had asked me out today, why she had told me all this so suddenly. She had never really intended to give up on Adrian. She just wanted to confirm where I stood. She wanted to know if Adrian's regret, his supposed sincerity, could make me look back, expressionless. I picked up my bag and stood. I glanced at her once and said quietly, "You don't need to waste your energy on this. Adrian and I are over, completely." Virginia froze for a moment, an awkward flicker crossing her face as if she'd been caught in her own lie. But in the end, she seemed relieved. During the Mid-Autumn Festival break, I didn't go home. I didn't have to work overtime either. So I stayed in my rented apartment, trying to finish the quarterly project plan. Dorian sent me something by mail, a hand-woven scarf, light gray, soft to the touch, warm, perfect for the season. But I didn't wear it. I folded it neatly and put it away in the drawer. After several sleepless nights, the plan still hadn't made any progress, and my head was starting to ache. A while later, weakness spread through my limbs. My body felt heavy, my strength draining away. With the last bit of energy I had, I grabbed my phone, opened my contacts, and tried to call Dorian. When the call connected, it wasn't his voice I heard, it was Leonardo's. "Jane?" That's when I realized I had dialed the wrong number. Before I could say a word, the world around me went black. When I woke up again, I was lying in a hospital bed, and 4 was taped to my wrist, and the air was thick with the smell of disinfectant. A few people stood nearby, talking in low voices. Leonardo sat beside the bed, typing on his laptop. The pale light fell across his face, highlighting the soft lines of his skin and even the faint peach fuzz along his jaw. When I finally spoke, I realized my voice was completely hoarse. He immediately closed his laptop, stood up, and poured me a glass of water from the thermos. As I drank, he stayed by my side, his voice calm and steady. "When you didn't say anything on the phone and didn't hang up, I guess something might have happened." I messaged Dorian, since he was farther away. He told me where you kept your spare key and asked me to check on you first. Still half groggy, it took me a while to process what he said. Then he added, "The doctor said you fainted from low blood sugar, caused by overwork and lack of sleep." I rubbed the tip of my nose, feeling a pang of guilt. Work's just been too busy lately. Leonardo looked at me for a moment, then suddenly smiled. "You're still the same, pushing yourself like back in high school." I blinked in surprise, a little embarrassed. "Where's Dorian?" Leonardo's lips curved faintly, his voice light. "He went to get you some food. Want to rest a bit more?" I nodded unconsciously, hesitated, then asked, "Did anyone else come while I was unconscious?" Leonardo was silent for a while before replying softly, "Your mom came by this morning." I lowered my head, clutching the corner of the blanket tightly. In a haze, I remembered seeing my mom with red eyes, her voice trembling as she asked the doctor, "Is my daughter going to be okay?" It was the first time I'd ever seen her cry for me. It felt so unreal that I thought I was dreaming. Suddenly, I felt a warm hand gently patting my head, reassuring, tender. I looked up abruptly, meeting Leonardo's eyes. The air between us shifted, something subtle, fragile. Then Leonardo's gaze suddenly froze, following his line of sight. I slowly turned my head. Adrian was standing at the doorway. I didn't know how long he'd been there. His eyes were red at the corners. Chapter 12. It had only been a month, but Adrian looked like a completely different person. His face was pale, his shirt wrinkled, a faint blue shadow of stubble on his chin, and deep dark circles under his eyes. It was obvious he hadn't been sleeping well. Because of his childhood, Adrian had always been particular about small details. His shirts were always crisp, his buttons neatly fastened to the very top, and his appearance clean and pleasant, like a spring breeze. This was the first time I had ever seen him so disheveled, so defeated. Something stirred in my chest. Pity? Maybe a little, but mostly, it was the quiet ache of knowing there was no going back. He had truly fallen for Virginia, whether it was curiosity, infatuation, or temporary excitement. It didn't matter. Without realizing it, the scales inside his heart had already tipped toward someone else. I could believe that he regretted it. I really could. But so what? The wound was already there, lodged deep in my heart. Every time I saw him, it hurt a little more. How could I stay with the man who once looked at me like I was his whole world, when that look no longer belonged to me? While I was lost in thought, Adrian walked over carrying a thermos, his tone tentative and careful. "Jane, I heard you were sick, so I made your favorite, crab porridge." I blinked, noticing the band-aid on his finger. He must have hurt himself while cooking. When he was a child, no one was home to take care of him. He learned to cook for himself, eating alone at the table every night. After life got better, he'd stopped entering the kitchen altogether. I never imagined he'd make something for me again. When I was cooking, I realized I ran out of soy sauce, he said with an awkward chuckle. By the time I came back, the porridge was almost burnt. I had to redo it a few times before it turned out right. I stared at him silently, and for some reason, my mind flashed to all those times he'd taken Virginia out for pork bone noodle soup, so casually, so willingly, giving her exceptions that I never once had. "So tell me, Adrian, are you trying to make up for something?" My eyes suddenly stung. "Adrian," I said quietly, "we've already broken up. You don't have to do this anymore." He froze, staring at me blankly, lost. "You should go," I added. "Jane, I've already talked things through with Virginia. I swear she won't bother us again." His lips trembled as he spoke, his voice shaking, nearly incoherent. It was all my fault. I don't even know what came over me. I must have lost my mind. I knew how she felt about me, but I still let her get close. I gave a short laugh, half bitter, half empty. Adrian's eyes reddened, and he reached out to grab my hand. I instinctively pulled away. His hand froze midair, hung there for a few seconds, then fell back to his side. "When did you start liking her?" I asked quietly. Adrian frowned, his expression twisting. He wanted to deny it, but in the end, he couldn't. We were assigned to the same project. She worked hard. She reminded me a lot of you, of how you used to be. I knew I loved you, but I still did things that hurt you. Jane, I really do regret it. He trailed off suddenly, his eyes darkening. A gentle breeze blew in from the window. Leonardo leaned down naturally, brushing aside a few strands of hair that had fallen across my forehead and tucking them behind my ear. He smelled faintly clean, subtle, comforting. My body tensed slightly. "Thanks," I murmured. Leonardo adjusted my blanket, his movements slow and precise. "Don't mention it," he said evenly, while I was still trying to figure out what exactly he meant by that. Leonardo looked up and met Adrian's gaze. "Go on," he said, voice calm and detached. Adrian fell silent. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked up, eyes red and hollow. "No matter what I do now, it won't change anything, will it?" I met his gaze steadily. "Some things," I said softly, "you just can't pretend never happened." Adrian lowered his eyes, carefully placing the thermos on the table. His voice was low, heavy. "I'm sorry." He walked slowly toward the door, shoulders slumped. The bright hospital light stretched his shadow long across the floor, loneliness trailing behind him. When he was gone, only Leonardo and I remained in the room. He opened the thermos and glanced inside, expression unreadable. "When you two were together, were you always the one who cooked?" I nodded. "Makes sense," he murmured, closing the lid again, his tone tinged with faint pity for the porridge. "Or maybe for me." Then he looked at me. "I'm actually pretty good at cooking." I blinked in surprise. Just then, the door opened, and a nurse came in to change my for. Leonardo turned back to his laptop, typing quietly as if nothing had happened. After the nurse left, I pulled the blanket up and closed my eyes, planning to rest. Then Leonardo's voice came again. "Jane." Eyes half closed, I hummed a quiet response. "When you heard him say all that just now, you didn't feel anything?" His voice was low, but clear in the silence of the room. I was quiet for a long moment. "No," I said finally. Leonardo seemed to smile faintly. "Good." I opened my eyes and sat up. Looking at him, he met my gaze directly, without hesitation, and in that moment, I suddenly remembered the way his eyes looked earlier when he'd leaned close to brush my hair aside. There had been something in them, something I couldn't quite name, but my instincts told me it wasn't my imagination. Chapter 13. Before I could stop myself, the words slipped out. "Are you?" "Yes." He seemed to know exactly what I was about to ask, and answered cleanly, openly, without hesitation. I froze. He looked straight at me, his gaze calm but gentle, and the emotions in his eyes were completely unhidden. Then, "Jane," he asked quietly, "how do you feel about it?" I stayed in the hospital for 2 more days. When I was discharged, it was Leonardo who came to pick me up. He opened the passenger door, resting one hand lightly on it, waiting for me to sit before walking around to the driver's seat. I felt oddly tense and couldn't help glancing at him. That day in the hospital, I had turned him down. Leonardo had done a lot for me lately. I was grateful, deeply moved even, but gratitude wasn't the same as affection. I didn't want to start something new before I truly let go of the past. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be unfair to myself, it would be unfair to him too. Leonardo seemed to have expected this. A flicker of disappointment crossed his eyes but disappeared almost instantly. "That's understandable," he said simply. Maybe my gaze lingered too long, because he smiled faintly. "Rejecting me is your right," he added lightly. "You don't owe me anything, not even an explanation." Then, reaching out, he ruffled my hair with a gentleness that caught me off guard. His tone softened, low and steady, carrying a quiet reassurance. "Don't feel guilty about it." A horn blared from the car behind us, pulling me back to reality. I turned to buckle my seatbelt, but before I could, a slender hand reached over. His touch was cool, but somehow, it burned against my skin. I instinctively pulled my hand back. Leonardo didn't react, just smoothly took the strap and fastened the buckle for me. My cheeks were hot. I turned toward the window, mumbling, "Didn't Dorian say he was coming to pick me up today?" Since I'd rejected Leonardo, I hadn't seen him again until now. There was a last-minute issue with a client in Shanghai, Leonardo said as he started the car. He volunteered to handle it. His hand rested casually on the wheel. His tone was steady, unhurried. He told me that if you need anything these days, you should come to me directly. I gave a small and pulled out my phone. Sure enough, there were a few messages from Dorian, sent half an hour ago. He'd used a crying emoji, complaining that someone had sent him off on a business trip at the last minute. Then came a meme, made from a candid photo of Leonardo. The caption read, "That someone." I stared at the screen, at Leonardo's face caught from a strange angle, still annoyingly handsome, and fell into thought. The night air was cool and soft, drifting in through the half-open window. It felt comfortable. Then I realized something. Every time I rode in Leonardo's car, he always left the window half open, just enough air to keep me from getting carsick, but not enough to make me cold. I couldn't help asking, "Did Dorian tell you I get carsick?" His voice was low. "No." "Then how?" Before I could finish, the traffic light turned red. Leonardo stepped on the brake, the car stopping smoothly. He turned his head toward me, his expression unreadable. Under that steady gaze, I felt a little uneasy and looked away. He chuckled softly. "You probably don't remember that day." I blinked. "What day?" "In high school," he said. "We took the same bus once. It was right before a break." He paused, his tone quiet, almost nostalgic. "The bus was crowded. You were sitting by the window, and there was a woman with a child next to you." I frowned, trying to remember. Nothing came to mind. "The kid fell asleep after a while," he went on. "You must have been worried he'd catch a cold, so you closed the window." He glanced at me briefly before continuing. "Then I noticed your face turning pale. You were sweating, your lips trembling. You looked like you were about to pass out, but you didn't say a word. You just sat there, pretending to sleep, your hand half curled on the windowsill." Leonardo gave a small, amused smile. That's when I thought my desk mate might look gentle and quiet. But she's a lot tougher than she seems. I blinked, and a hazy memory slowly surfaced in my mind. Back in high school, my motion sickness had been at its worst. I remembered feeling dizzy and nauseated. Everything spinning, my thoughts fuzzy. At some point, someone must have switched seats beside me. I vaguely recalled a hand offering me a tissue, the window being open just enough for fresh air to drift in. But I hadn't paid attention to who that person was. Only after getting off the bus did I finally start to feel better. Then it hit me. I turned to him. Was it you who sat next to me afterward? Leonardo's reply came fast. Certain. Yes. I froze for a moment. A strange, indescribable feeling rose inside me. The light turned green. Leonardo started the car again. His tone light, almost teasing. From that moment on, I started paying attention to you. My heart gave a small, startled thump. At first, I couldn't even tell if it was affection or just curiosity. He said softly, but I couldn't help watching you, a little more than everyone else. He let out a quiet sigh, like he was half amused and half regretful. I was too slow back then. I murmured. So was I. Because honestly, I hadn't noticed a thing. Then, a different memory came back. How the lights in the hallway had gone out one semester. I had always been the last to leave after night study. Leonardo, too, had started leaving late. Almost every time, I'd walk out first, and he'd follow just a few steps behind. Now that I thought about it, maybe he'd been waiting, making sure I didn't have to walk through that dark hallway alone. I went to see you once in college, Leonardo said, his voice low, rough around the edges. It was raining that day. I saw you walking under an umbrella with a guy. He had his arm around your waist, and you had your head tucked against his chest. I went quiet. It wasn't until that moment, when I felt that sudden emptiness, that I realized what I truly felt for you. I looked up at him, just as he turned his head. For a few seconds, our eyes met. Neither of us said a word. When we finally got to my place, he parked and got out first, walking me to the door. Thank you for the ride, I said softly, keeping my eyes down. Just as I was about to turn and go upstairs, a warm hand caught my wrist, firm but careful, avoiding the spot where my forehead had been. I gasped in surprise. Actually, Leonardo said quietly, standing close enough that his voice brushed against my ear. Low and cool. I lied to you. Lied? I stammered, startled. My mind jumped immediately to Dorian and the so-called business trip. His lips curved faintly. I'm not as calm as I look. His eyes locked onto mine, dark, steady, burning quietly. That night you turned me down. I couldn't sleep. I ran 40 laps around the neighborhood trying to clear my head. I was really upset. I stared at him, utterly dumbfounded, unsure what to say. Then his voice softened, almost like a promise. Jane, if you're not ready for another relationship yet. He paused, eyes never leaving mine. That's okay. I can wait. Chapter 14. After he left, I stood downstairs alone for a long time. When I finally went upstairs, I saw a familiar figure not far away. Under the moonlight, with the shadows of the trees swaying gently, Adrian stood there quietly. Jane, he called my name softly, his voice carrying a trace of pleading. I walked toward him slowly. When he saw me approach, surprise flickered across his face, and he called my name again. The next moment, I said clearly, Adrian, don't come looking for me anymore. I lowered my head, my voice barely above a whisper. From now on, I'll start a new life, maybe even a new relationship. Jane, he repeated my name unconsciously, his voice full of confusion and panic. Maybe until that very moment, he had still held on to hope, believing we were just having a fight, a temporary rift. But I didn't want to give him false hope anymore. It took all my strength to say, but that person will never be you again. Adrian and I had known each other for more than 20 years, and we'd been together for 5. We had seen each other at our lowest, shared our fears and pain, and done our best to warm each other's hearts. I had truly believed we would stay together forever. But suddenly, everything changed. He fell in love with someone else. During those sleepless nights, one thought kept circling in my mind. He had once pursued me with such sincerity and passion. So why was I now the only one struggling to keep us together? Looking back was wrong. Moving forward was wrong. I knew some people fade away slowly with time. But I never imagined it would happen like this, with such an ending. Maybe one day I'll forgive him, but I will never be able to be with him again. After that day, Adrian never appeared again. As for Virginia, she once sent me a message saying she was leaving the city. She didn't say much else. I never understood why she felt the need to tell me, but it no longer mattered. I had no feelings left for her, no resentment, no curiosity, whether she truly gave up on Adrian or not, whether she lived well or badly. None of it had anything to do with me anymore. Chapter 15. Without realizing it, a whole year had passed. It felt like so much had happened in that year. I went home twice, each time wearing that light gray scarf. Later, I found out it wasn't what I had thought. I'd always believed it was something my mom had knitted for my brother, and that he'd simply passed it on to me. But from the very beginning, that scarf had been made for me. It was also during that year that I made a breakthrough at work. After breaking up with Adrian, I'd forced myself to forget him. But after being together for so many years, it was impossible to erase his traces from my life completely. To truly move on wasn't easy. To distract myself, I volunteered to take on a new project. I spent my days rushing between the office and clients, filling my time so completely that there was no space left for the past. The unexpected result was that not only did the project perform exceptionally well, but I also got promoted twice in 1 year. In that non-stop, fast-paced life, it wasn't until one day, when I suddenly had a rare moment of rest, that I realized I hadn't thought about the past in a long time. Instead, my relationship with Leonardo had become subtly different. When I worked late, he would drive to pick me up. On weekends, we'd go to the movies, play games, or just hang out. I could feel it, we were getting closer. Leonardo's quiet companionship and understanding gave me a kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I began to realize I was slowly accepting him. The day we officially got together happened to be the day of the company retreat. Because of my outstanding performance, I'd been promoted again, and my colleagues wouldn't stop making me drink to celebrate. By the time Leonardo came to pick me up, I was already drunk. He carried me into the bedroom, and for some reason, as soon as he laid me down on the bed, I started to cry. He held me in his arms, his voice low and hoarse. "Why are you crying?" Looking up at him, that same indescribable, complicated feeling rose up again. With my head resting on his chest, arms wrapped around his waist, I began to talk about everything. My mother, Adrian, Dorian, the people I had loved, hated, and resented, the things that had hurt me and that I couldn't let go of. I'd always been reserved, rarely letting my emotions spill out, let alone talking so openly. But with Leonardo, I felt safe. He had a way of making the world quieter, of grounding me. When I finally stopped, he sighed softly, resting his chin gently on the top of my head, and said, calm and firm, "Some wounds can never be forgiven, but even when we carry hate, we still have the right to love and to be loved." That night, Leonardo didn't leave. Time passed quickly. Today was my birthday. Leonardo was in the kitchen cooking, and Dorian was helping him. Watching them bustle around, a strange warmth filled my heart. My mother had always favored my younger brother, but Dorian had always treated me well. All these years, he'd been like a steady, comforting light, someone who quietly warmed my life. And by a twist of fate, when he joined a new company, I ran into Leonardo again. Leonardo was like the moon after rain, gentle and calm. He never rushed me, never pushed. His quiet patience and tenderness made me feel at ease, made me feel safe. Now, both of them had become irreplaceable parts of my life, strong, steady, and full of warmth. While they were still busy in the kitchen, I opened a small anonymous package in the living room. Inside was a ring. I turned it in my fingers, and saw 2 letters engraved on the inside, a J. There was a small card tucked inside the box. On it were a few simple words, "Happy birthday, wishing you peace and safety." For a moment, I felt disoriented. I had seen this ring once before, 1 year ago. That night, after a shower, I'd been looking for my hairdryer when I accidentally opened the second drawer of Adrian's nightstand and found it there. Back then, I'd been waiting for him to propose. I'd even dropped a few hints, here and there, but he never said a word. I couldn't understand it. He'd already bought the ring, why couldn't he take that final step? Until one evening, when we went to see a movie together, at the climax, the male lead knelt and proposed to the heroine. I finally gathered my courage, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Adrian, you bought a ring too, didn't you?" He didn't respond. Something cold and uneasy crept up my spine. When I turned my head stiffly toward him, I saw him looking down at his phone, smiling, watching a video of that girl named Virginia. And in that instant, I finally understood why he had hesitated. Tibet trip, extra story. During the National Day holiday, Leonardo and I went on a trip to Tibet. It wasn't for anything particularly romantic. The company was planning to develop a hot spring resort there. And to secure the position of project lead, I decided to do an on-site inspection myself. By the time we reached the guest house, it was already late. After sitting in the car for hours, I lazily sprawled on the bed, planning to rest for a bit before heading out for dinner. Then something warm and soft suddenly covered my eyes. It was the comforting touch of a hot towel. "Feeling any better?" Leonardo's gentle voice came from above me. My heart softened, and I hummed softly in response. "Then let's do it a few more times." And so, Leonardo patiently replaced the hot towel several times without a hint of complaint. Sure enough, the warmth eased my fatigue and the soreness in my shoulders. I thought for a moment, then sat up and looked at him. "Let me give you a massage." Leonardo paused, towel still in hand, one eyebrow raised. "All right." I moved behind him slowly and placed my hands on his shoulders, kneading carefully with steady pressure. I could feel the tension in his muscles gradually easing when my hands slid to the back of his neck, intending to massage there as well. His body suddenly stiffened. After a long silence, his voice came out low and rough. "Don't." I froze, confused. Before I could react, he reached out and pulled me toward him in one swift motion. I fell against his shoulder, caught completely off guard. I gasped softly and instinctively wrapped my arms around his neck. He seemed to chuckle under his breath, his hand pressing gently on my waist, guiding me to sit across his lap. His breath brushed against my ear, warm and quiet. "Let's eat first," he murmured, voice muffled. "You can continue later." My face flushed instantly. The restaurant we'd reserved was only a short walk from the guest house, just 10 minutes away. We ordered a few of their signature dishes. The place was packed tonight, so it took quite a while before everything arrived. Leonardo placed a few pastries on my plate and peeled shrimp before dropping them gently into my bowl. "You get carsick easily," he said softly. "You barely ate anything today, eat more now." I nodded, realizing just how hungry I was. While eating, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone behind us was watching me. I turned around in curiosity, but there was nothing, no one suspicious at all. When dinner ended, it was already 8 o'clock. Leonardo suddenly suggested, "Let's go soak in the hot springs." I looked up at him, slightly surprised. Our eyes met. His expression was calm and open, the corners of his lips curving faintly. "Since we came here to evaluate the project," he said, "it only makes sense to experience it ourselves." Something about him felt off. Leonardo was always composed and methodical. If he decided to do something, he would plan everything carefully in advance. Changing plans on a whim just wasn't like him. He'd said we'd visit the hot springs tomorrow. Why the sudden change of mind? The restaurant was connected to the hot spring area by a long wooden corridor, polished smooth by years of use. As we walked through it, Leonardo kept his arm around my waist, steadying me so I wouldn't slip. When we arrived, we changed into light robes and chose a small private pool big enough for 2 or 3 people. The spring water steamed gently, the air filled with a faint floral scent. I eased myself slowly into the pool, and a wave of warmth spread through my body. Every muscle relaxed. I felt like I could melt right there. After a while, I heard Leonardo call my name, "Jane." I looked up and saw him leaning lazily against the edge of the pool, his gaze deep and steady on me. My heart skipped a beat. Something about him felt different tonight. "My eye seems to have gotten water in it," he said evenly. "Huh?" He took a long step forward, the rippling water parting effortlessly around him, stopping right in front of me. He leaned down, eyes half closed. "Blow on it for me." My heartbeat faltered for a moment. I could guess what he was trying to do. But still, I reached up, steadying his head, and blew gently toward his eye. The next second, his hand, which had been resting lightly on my shoulder, slid down to my waist and pulled me closer. Then, he kissed me. His breath trailed from my cheek to my ear, scorching hot against my skin. I wrapped my arms around his neck, letting his fingers trace slow circles along my waist. Our breathing grew unsteady, hearts pounding wildly against each other's chests. And then, suddenly, the doorbell rang. The abrupt sound startled me. Only then did I realize the door wasn't completely closed. "Who's there?" My voice was rough and trembling, as if soaked in water. But outside, there was only silence. I turned toward Leonardo, only to find him calm, too calm. His expression gave nothing away. But somehow, I could tell he already knew who it was. I raised an eyebrow at him. We left the hot spring area together. The cool night air brushed past, and we walked hand in hand through the quiet courtyard. "I saw Adrian at the restaurant earlier," Leonardo said suddenly. I wasn't surprised. "Oh." He stopped walking and looked straight into my eyes, dark, quiet, and impossibly deep. "Everything I did just now," he said, voice low and clear, "was on purpose." "Oh." Leonardo lowered his gaze slightly. "Last week, he sent you a ring." I blinked. "I sent it back, but just a little more." His voice carried a trace of frustration. "And you might have." I squeezed his hand, my tone slow but firm. "It's over." He froze for a moment. We looked at each other for what felt like a long time, until finally, he smiled, like ice melting under sunlight. The light in his eyes flickered with warmth and fire. He clasped my hand tightly in his, solid, reassuring. "Yes," he said softly. "It's all over." Adrian's side story. After another sleepless night at the office, I rubbed my temples and took a sip of the now cold coffee sitting on my desk. The bitter taste barely dulled the exhaustion weighing down my body. Reaching for my phone, I logged into my alternate WeChat account and, as usual, opened her Moments page. The latest post read, "Any good hot springs in Tibet? Work trip." Attached was a candid photo of her at the airport, profile turned slightly toward the window, light spilling across her face. She'd never been one to post many pictures, so for her to share this one, she must have really liked it. For a long moment, I just stared. My thumb brushed lightly over the screen, over her face, over that faint smile at the corner of her lips, as if by tracing the image, I could somehow touch her again. That familiar ache in my chest, the restless urge to see her, to go to her, rose uncontrollably. Like a wave I could no longer hold back. Even though she'd returned the ring just last week, even though there was already someone else by her side, even though I'd sworn not to disturb her life again. But these days, it was as if my soul had gone missing. I couldn't stop replaying our memories, every moment, every glance, every word. Even in my dreams, she was there, smiling softly at me the way she used to. Since she'd blocked and deleted all my contacts, I'd created this small account just to add her again, torturing myself by scrolling through her posts, watching her life continue without me. That photo, I thought bitterly, was probably taken by him. After staring at the picture for a long while, I finally typed a single comment under it. "Take care." Just then, my phone vibrated. It was a client texting me. By the time I replied and went back to her post, the screen had gone blank. The post was gone. She'd deleted me. The sharp pain hit instantly, like someone had driven a nail straight through my chest. She had recognized me, and she truly didn't want to leave even a trace of me in her world. I don't even know what I was thinking. By the time I came to my senses, I was already on a plane to Tibet. No message, no contact, no plan. Trying to find someone in Tibet without a lead was like searching for a single drop of water in the ocean. But somehow, I found her, or rather, them. When I saw her again for the first time in nearly a year, I barely recognized her. She looked thinner, maybe, but her skin glowed. She was radiant, peaceful, happy. He must have been taking good care of her. They were talking, laughing softly. Then, as if sensing something, she turned her head slightly, her eyes brushed past me with faint confusion. I dropped my gaze quickly, pulling my jacket tighter around me. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. She probably didn't notice me, right? I followed them to the hot spring area. Their door wasn't closed. Through the narrow gap, I saw them kissing. That single moment hit like a blade through my chest. The pain radiated outward, searing every nerve ending until I could barely breathe. The cigarette in my fingers burned down to the filter, the ash scorching my skin, but I didn't even feel it. And then, our eyes met. His, Leonardo's. He knew I was there, and he did it on purpose. He smiled faintly, unbothered, and kissed her deeper. My mind went blank. The next thing I knew, the shrill sound of a doorbell pierced the air, mingling with the roar in my head. I turned and walked away, dazed, hollow, every step heavier than the last. Why? How did we end up like this? How did Jane and I, after all those years, all that love, come to this point where we'd become strangers under the same sky? Jane told me that it was because I'd fallen for someone else. I wanted to deny it. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out because deep down, I knew I had no defense. All I could do was watch her leave, exhaustion written all over her face, disappointment weighing down her shoulders. Did I ever truly like Virginia? I don't know, but what I do know is that I loved Jane, really loved her, with everything I had, from the beginning to the end. Then I remembered something from a year ago, something I'd never explained. That night, Virginia had made a bet with me. She said she could win one of those lover's knots. And if she did, I'd have to buy her dinner. I should have refused, but when she looked at me with those smiling, confident eyes, for some reason I couldn't bring myself to say no. From the moment she went up on stage to play the piano, until she came back holding that red lover's knot, an inexplicable irritation burned quietly in my chest. Virginia seemed to notice something in my expression. She leaned close, voice laced with laughter. Guess what I wrote on it? Her breath was warm against my neck. I frowned, voice flat. What? She froze, the smile fading for a second. Then she pulled back, a small distance between us. After a pause, she said softly, I wrote your name and Jane's. I was startled. Slowly, I picked up the knot and turned it over. Sure enough, there they were, our names written side by side. Virginia's tone was calm when she said, now you should be happy. My fingers brushed over the two names. Somehow, they just felt right together, like they always belonged that way. Just like when we were kids, when I used to walk her home every day to keep bullies away. Or when we did classroom duty, and I'd always write my name next to hers on the roster. Just like the ring in my drawer, the one I designed myself, with our initials engraved on the inside. It was always supposed to be this way. Thinking of that, I couldn't help but smile faintly. Yeah, I whispered. I'm happy.